morning. Welcome to Morning Coffee with Media. This morning we're joined by Corbin Carson from KFI 640 iHeartRadio, right?
Correct.
Is that how I say
Correct.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Corbin has been covering compelling and investigative journalism for little over a decade and a half, right, in Southern California and the Southland, and about 5 years here in Orange County.
Right.
Correct? But what many people don't know is that he actually started his career in radio as a rap artist.
Right.
And so I would love to have you jump into more about how you got involved. And by the way, we're talking about a rap artist on the street in Phoenix, Arizona.
Right. Yeah. Yep. It was, quite a journey. It started as I'm just a kid and, in the room with the brush in the mirror, coming up with, different shows and making out full performances as a child. That moved into, I was a pianist at 5 doing recitals.
Oh, I love that.
And I just loved the attention. I was one of those, what you would call a class clown, and this guy's never going to be anything. And, all the attention turned into pretty much what I am today. But I started doing talent shows in high school and dance competitions, and I met what turned out to be a lifelong friend of mine. We formed a group called No Question, and we were trying to bring hip hop to Arizona, and this was this was a bold mission that as you can see, it turned out well. I'm now a reporter in L.A. But
so let's just set the stage, though. This is when Tupac was still alive.
Right.
So 90s hip hop was not as hailed as we hail it now, right?
And I remember the day that he died. I remember that we were actually on tour in Colorado when that happened, and it's funny because he's that's in the news again. They're researching a house, reopening that case, and that was a big deal back then. And you're right, hip hop was not as accepted as it is now. It was frowned upon by America, and it's funny to me to see the view that people have of Tupac and other rappers now versus how it was growing up then, trying to fight for what we were calling a craft, trying to say that we were telling stories as it was from our experience in the street and growing up, and it was something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I had chosen hip hop. I remember one time I was in college, and I had a weekend where because I was also a Muay Thai kickboxer.
Yes.
And I had won a state title as a kickboxer, and so I was
seen a theme. He keeps winning titles.
Right.
And we're gonna see that as your career goes on.
And so I had a finals in college. I had a kickboxing tournament. I was defending my title, and I had a show with Outkast all in the same weekend. And that was when I sat down and said, okay, I got to pick one. Which one am I going to do? And, school is hard. You have to study. And kickboxing, you're getting beat up. And then rapping, you get to stay up all night and do whatever you want. So I was like, I'm a kid. Why not choose rap? And so that is what I ended up doing. We did thousands of shows, shared the stages with, I don't know if you guys know these people, Wu-Tang.
Hello.
The late, great Notorious B.I.G., some Tupac, some Eminem, and we toured with the Roots, Del, the Funk Homo Sapiens, the Alcoholics. I could go on.
Okay, I just literally, everything stops when it comes to Eminem.
Right.
He's like so iconic.
Funny story, we had a lot of groups around us, and Eminem's, one of his friends, Proof, was in one of our other groups called The Associates, and he ended up dying a little bit later. But so that was my rap career. And then one day I decided, this isn't paying the bills. You're doing all this work for an album. You're waiting for this so-called break. You think you're great. You're getting off stage. People are like, man, you are so amazing. I'm like, yeah, but I still have another job after this that's, not paying the bills. And I wanted to do something that still allowed me to be that kid with the brush in the mirror and do, tell stories. And I thought, well, how about I be a journalist? And how hard can that be?
Yeah. I love that. One of the things I love about Morning Coffee With is that we get the opportunity to kind of get the real personal story behind who you are as a person and how that informed your career. But I think that I just came back from New York. I went. I took my daughters to Broadway, and we saw Hamilton again.
How was that?
We first saw it in at the Pantages.
Okay.
But there was something really magical about. Obviously, it's Broadway. The theaters are smaller. But the first time I saw it at Pantages, the first time I ever seen it, I didn't see it on Disney Plus at that point.
Right.
And now Disney Plus has been playing over and over and over, and my kids are like, the music. But what I loved about seeing it again in a smaller setting was just the storytelling of rap. I caught so much more because we had just come from D.C. for 4th of July, where we went to all the monuments. We kind of like relived the American story, went to Philly, saw the Liberty Bell, the Public House, all of it was happening. And then we ended on Broadway. And rap tells really interesting stories, and I missed so much the first time.
Yeah.
As a rap artist, how was it for you to experience Hamilton?
Sadly, I actually haven't seen it.
What?
Right. Isn't that bad? I know. I'm from a very nuanced area of hip hop. Like when I started rapping, it was this mix. Me as an artist, this was this mix between I wanted to be a conscious rapper, but I was also I wanted to be very street at the same time, and I wanted to tell this is what we were living at the time. These were my friends were doing, and so the stories that you're mentioning, it really was like turning on the camera for us in real life. And I don't know. I guess I just didn't get a chance to see that movie just yet. But
it's
or that play.
It's
sorry.
phenomenal. But I bring it up because what struck me was the absolute profound statements that they were able to make in their storytelling. And so what I think a lot of people don't realize is the depth of storytelling that goes into the songs that you the raps that you wrote. And how that might have informed your career in journalism. So can you kind of tell us how that bridged for you?
It's weird because rap and journalism are interestingly similar.
Yeah.
Again, it's like one. I like to tell people telling stories from the streets, and I went from doing that on hip hop, and now I'm telling stories on the streets. The only difference is in rap, it's all about you. So you're always talking about I'm the greatest. I do this. This is what I experience. You can't do anything about it. And then the flip side is journalism is nothing about you. You want to not insert yourself in the story as much as possible, but it's super easy because you don't have to rhyme all the words, so it becomes it becomes easier to tell the stories. But I went back to I went to graduate school. I went to the Walter Cronkite School of Broadcast, School of Communications. Got my master's, and I learned everything about journalism. And it's a phenomenal school, just a phenomenal school. I learned so much about how to do this craft properly, how to be a real journalist, and I fell in love with it in a way that I didn't think that I would. If you think about rap, as I was mentioning before, there's different types of rappers. You have you have the commercial, what we call the sellouts, the people that will you're just doing this you're following a style of the time. And then you have these low, people that are in the grime of it. They're coming from the, and it's similar to me about reporting is what I'm trying to say, is that you have some people that are just, I'll say whatever it is to get clicks. I'll do whatever is the current trend. And then you have people like that do spotlight journalism, like that movie Spotlight, one of my favorite movies. And you do something that impacts people for years and years and years. And that's what I fell in love with, saying that I'm here to be an unbiased speaker for the people. I'm here to tell stories for the people that don't have a voice and try to shine a spotlight on the darkest corners.
Yeah, I love that. And you approach it so relationally, too. And I know that around our offices here at Reveille, Corbin is a beloved name. They always love working with you. And you actually get to make a lot of your own choices in the role that you are. So are you glad you stuck to radio?
Radio was an interesting turn. I didn't plan it that way. When I went back to school, I was doing print, and I was doing TV, and I was doing a little tiny bit of radio, and learning the different styles of journalism. And for those of you who don't know, each medium has its own, benefits and its own requirements. So for and its own downsides. So for print, you have more time to tell a story. You have more time to add in details. You can really dive into one story. You can spend a lot of time. You can dig up things that haven't been dug up before. You can do research and really let people know an entire story, especially when you're talking about doing things online where a story can go on forever. You don't have to have it fit into a couple of pages on the newspaper like it was in the old days. And then you have TV where you have a 2-minute package typically, and you have pictures to tell your story, and how much great is that? But you're on at 4 and you're on at 6 or 10 o'clock news, and you're waiting for that one story to air. Whereas radio, I'm on all the time, and as soon as something happens, hey, this is breaking, this wildfire, go out there, join our show, talk to the talk show hosts, and then explain every half hour. It's immediate. So so it's a different...
And it's like 20 seconds.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, 30, 45 seconds to condense often a very complicated subject. And that's one of the things I do like about that is being able to tightly write both sides of an argument or several sides of an argument into that 30 seconds.
That's great. So let's kind of back up a little bit, because something that I think is really interesting about how you started out. What many of you might not know is that Corbin actually did his first bout of research in election fraud way back before 2020 happened. We're talking Obama era, and the concerns about election fraud back then. And his research actually has been quoted by the Supreme Court and by many people. And so why don't you take us back to that interesting elevator ride that kind of changed the trajectory of your career?
So I'm in the Cronkite School, and I needed a summer fellowship to kind of expand what I was going to do with my career, whatever that was going to be. And there was this fellowship, very prestigious, called News 21, and you would have hundreds of journalists from around the country applying for this for essentially 27 spots. And they were housing it that year in Cronkite, so it was perfect for me because I could stay home. I have kids. And the person who was leading it was Lynn Downey Jr. He, at the time, was executive editor of the Washington Post. He hails from the Watergate era. And, already you're intimidated as a student. You're like, wow, now I'm meeting the Lynn Downey. He's leading this class. He's coming in, letting people know how stringent it's going to be. It was a summer fellowship. It's only supposed to be for 2 months. And I had an idea. The theme of that year was elections, because it was 2012, the Obama elections. He's being reelected, and there's this argument going on about voter ID laws. And this is when people were like, hey, well, how come you just can't have a license to vote? That was the argument. And so I thought to myself, what if we just counted all the voter fraud, like ever? And
sure, why not?
Right. Hey, okay. So a kid, so what are you gonna do? And I thought to myself, I'm gonna try this. And so the elevator pitch. He was actually walking out of the campus, so it wasn't an elevator, but it's still an elevator pitch. I walk up to him. I'm saying, hey, we got all this thing. I know we're doing elections. I think this voter fraud thing is a big deal. What if we just counted all the voter fraud? That's my voter fraud pitch, And he stopped. And as you guys know in public relations, if you get someone to stop and listen to you, you've got their attention. The pitch, the lead, that's the biggest thing. It's a big deal for you. It's a big deal for me. Whenever I lead off to a story, I want the anchor to say something that has people like, oh, what is this about? This is a Corbin story. Of course, the lead is funny or something like that. And but really, that's the way that you engage people into a story. Like, for example, did you know? See?
Right.
For that moment, you're like, no,
Wait, what?
What's going on? I got you.
Did you know at that moment how much work you got yourself into?
Right. No, I didn't. And so anyway, he looked at me. He said, all right, come back to me with how you would pull that off. And wow, it ended up being a year-long project. There was, at one point, the entire News 21 crew was working on my project. They all had their own projects, but we counted all the voter fraud in 3,000 counties went to the DOJ, all the DA's offices. We were getting coffee-stained responses to public records requests, no voter fraud. Or we would get the phone book, and then we had to start differentiating between what was in-person voter fraud and what was election fraud and what was absentee ballot fraud, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We came up with like 12 categories. And the results ended up being, we found 10 cases of voter fraud, a legitimate voter fraud from 2012 to 2000. And that's after all, and we put all this public source because we knew we were going to get attacked.
Right.
So we put it all up there and did the math, and the chances of the voter fraud impacting an election were infinitesimal or something like that. It was 0.000 out of hundreds of millions of votes cast. And people didn't like this. And the funny thing about this story is the thing that makes me a good journalist, I think, is that a lot of the times people don't know this, but I don't care. I have a cynicism that makes me question everything. So if that story had turned out with volumes of voter fraud, I just would have been on different radio stations telling the story. It was going to be a story either way. Yeah. It turned out with none, and so people on one side of the spectrum were like, "Oh, great, you must be this kind of journalist." I'm not. I just wanted a good story. That was the whole point of doing it. But I never expected the story to. I mean, I'm a student. I've been in journalism at this point 4 months, and we dropped that story. It hits the front page of a dozen newspapers across the country. Obama has quoted our stats that year.
That's incredible.
It was in the U.S. Supreme Court, especially with the 2020 thing.
And you didn't even have your degree.
I didn't. I didn't. I was still a student. It was in 3 state Supreme Courts. So all the cases that came up during the Trump and Biden election, they were citing this, as part of their evidence for why they say that this wasn't a thing. And it made sense when this election came back around for me to recover it. So, because now I'm out here and
right.
And I
so
did.
Can you guys just say, who knew, right? Corbin.
Right.
It's so awesome.
Yeah.
So that brings me to kind of this trend that we're seeing, and not a trend, but it's just the reality. Newsrooms are changing. Budgets are shrinking. LA Times just had layoffs a month ago.
Are you trying to say I left one not paying industry and joined another one?
Kind of, but
Yeah.
anyway. But what happens is that a lot of seasoned journalists that have expertise, and when I had mentioned to you, we'd had Vicky Vargas on before, and she
Love
talked.
her, by the way.
Oh, she's the best.
She is.
She's the best. She talked about really encouraging future journalism students to develop an expertise. Not just become a journalist, like develop an expertise. We're seeing a lot of newsrooms, letting go of seasoned journalists that have the ability to have nuance, develop expertise to be able to really report completely, to working with newsrooms that are, having to hire, younger journalists because of budgets, and then we're not seeing journalists kind of have some of the same expertise. So in some ways, it's great you get kind of a different tone of a story. And then sometimes with expertise, you can get the cynicism or the bias of someone's expertise. But for the most part, I would say that I really love working with seasoned journalists and their expertise. They ask really good questions, and we have to stay on our toes and
Right.
make sure that we're ready.
Yeah.
But all that to say is, especially as it comes to politics, I know you mentioned this, but how do you make sure that deep understanding about election fraud doesn't cloud your ability to tell both sides of a story when it comes to the political landscape? Because you interviewed one of the leading lawyers that was on Trump's team because they were here. I don't want
Right.
to mention the university because I know they hate that he was there. But he was based here in Orange County. You interviewed him. How did you allow yourself to stay open to his perspective, knowing that you were part of this earlier body of work?
Yeah, he's. I just did a follow-up story on his disbarment, his potential disbarment hearing, maybe a month or so ago. Very interesting guy. I think that the way that I do it is, going back to what I said, I don't care. So before I became a reporter, as a rapper, I'm seeing everything that's happening, and to me, I didn't think Republicans or Democrats were helping. Right. So it's easy for me because I don't have a side. I think sometimes, and this is gonna be controversial, but I think that it feels like there's big powers at play, and hey, let's just let these people argue about the politics while we do this over here. It's like the Kansas City Shuffle. Look over here, I'm gonna do this over here. And really it's money that's running everything, and greed and corporations and stuff like that, and they just let us argue about what we think is important. And so as a result, when I go into a story covering this person you don't want to mention.
No, I don't want to bring the university's
name
forward.
The school. John Eastman is his name. He's one of Trump's lawyers. He is the one that came up with the idea that of just decertifying the election. And he was in D.C. that day, and I won't go into the details of the story, but he believes this. This is the answer to your question. He believes this, people believe this, and as a journalist, that makes it a story. And I'm interested in the story. I'm interested in why he believes this, how he wants to back this. But now that he is Eastman is in an issue where he's dealing with potential disbarment hearings, I'm also interested in that story. You know, it was fun when, you weren't in trouble, but now you are in trouble. I'm calling for that too, and so it's easy for me to stay biased or to stay unbiased because I'm into the story. Another example would be when Orange County was in the big fight with the governor about the beaches and everything was shut down for COVID. There were so many people that didn't believe in the disease. There were people that businesses were closed. There were people that put a lot of effort into their life. Their whole lives were being ruined. And they thought, shutting everything down was an overreaction. I don't understand how that's not a story. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with people that are not trying to accept exactly what they hear from the government at face value. They want to question that. And as a result, regardless of what I believe about the virus and that I had already been covering for quite some time, it was 700 people out there for that day. I remember I showed up and I went immediately live. I was like, you would have thought it was 2019 out here. You remember when the streets were closed and nobody was out? Seeing this many people in public was amazing. And talking to them, my business just shut down. I just took out 3 loans. My hair shop is right there. I can't work. I'm gonna go under. That's a story. It doesn't matter about the politics. And to me, that's what makes it easy for me to keep stories balanced, is because I care, I'm empathetic for a person's story. I understand their story, and I want to tell it.
I love that you're able to kind of hold that tension. So as we go into 2024, what do you think?
Not looking forward to it.
I don't think any of us are.
It's
because we're not looking forward to it because it's going to get really hard for us to get stories placed. Right. Because the drama is going to dominate.
It's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Using the voter fraud as an example, it's a bit taxing for me. Not that that's the main point. Obviously it's my job, but because when I tell people, hey, here's a funny story. So my wife's parents, super Republican, like uber Republican, and they have me. I show up as a rap guy. I want to marry your daughter, and so that didn't go great. But they love me. I love them, and they were there when I was doing the voter fraud story. We all love each other. It's a great family. They're the best, and they love me and they trust me. And we're out to dinner one day. I'm finishing the project. They helped me edit some of the areas. We were out on the beach editing the final thing before the election. We dropped it in August 2012. Election's right there. And I'll never forget my wife's mom. She's standing there and she says, all right, so, and I was like, yeah, 10 cases. You saw the data. She's like, all right, so how do you think they're hiding it? You understand that 3,000 counties, that means I'm asking for voter fraud from very Republican counties. If they had it, they would say it. It's not there. And that's what frustrates me coming into next year, is because we spend so much time arguing about stuff that doesn't matter. Nothing's ever getting done. And that just makes me more cynical.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. Okay, so you brought it up. You married a woman as a rapper, and you got through the approval.
I don't know
But
why she chose me, but
but let's. What is the numbers? 27, 24, 12, and 9. I think I got that right.
last night's lottery for the billion
Oh my gosh, right? And that was from a place on Skid Row.
in LA. Yep.
I'm like, okay, I cannot wait to see who did this.
Somebody at a tent's like, yes,
I know. I thought that.
that would be great. I would love that story.
I would love that story too. So 27, 24, 12, and 9.
Those are my children's ages. My daughter,
27. Did you guys all hear that? 27.
My daughter's 27. She's in Hawaii this weekend with her daughter, which means...
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Grandfather.
Yeah. Twice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And he doesn't say his age, so don't ask. Just know that he grew up when Tupac was alive.
Right. And I have a 27-year-old daughter. So, I mean, unless I was 5. Anyway. Yeah, so my first 2 kids were obviously there's that huge break between 24 and 12 or that was my rap days was the first 2, and then I got married, and that's the second the quote doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. But my kids are amazing. I'm very lucky to have been a part of their lives, and it definitely impacts everything I do in journalism because I do a ton of kid stories. I even did a parenting segment for a couple years in Phoenix, had the governor on of Arizona.
It's really good. If you Google Corbin's name and Phoenix parenting, you'll get to see some of his early work on that parenting show. I watched it. It was great.
It was so much fun because what I would do is I would interview people about parenting questions that I already had, and I had a little spiel I would say at the end. I would say I have one in college, one in high school, one in kindergarten, and one in diapers at the time. And so chances are I'm facing some sort of parenting question you have. I mean, when my older kids were born, I was a very young parent. My oldest daughter got to do everything with her rapper dad. So as a result, she is just like me then, which is not what I was looking for. And then today, I'm to be a more seasoned father, I would say, with my younger kids and seeing where I went wrong with my other kids, with my older kids, and how I had to make up for that and trying to fix those things. It's really fulfilling, having that.
So how has that affected your reporting? Being a parent, that is.
Other than like the parenting series that I told you about, doing stories that I know parents want to talk about and hear about because it's something I'm interested in. And that typically is what leads every story I do. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Guess I can do a story on it, and I'll learn everything about it. I do a ton of like child type stories where kids are being hurt in one way or another, and it's really hard. I didn't know it was going to be something that I wanted to do until I think the first one was this 6-year-old that got shot by. This was in Phoenix by a couple of this couple was arguing, and the guy was trying to show off or something, and the bullet hit the kid. And then they tried to hide it and cover it up and stuff like that. And at first I was super emotional about it, but then I was like, hey, blank that. This is a kid's show, right? I can't say stuff. I can say blank, right? But I want to speak up for this kid. You know what I mean? Like, no one's here to advocate for this child. So I did that story, and then right after that, a few months later, another guy drove his whole family into a lake in Arizona, and the divers were still finding kids in the back of this van. And I was like, I can't do this. And I still did it. And that was when I started realizing, wow, you really take this stuff home. Yeah. And then fast forward to today, the 2 of the most recent would be the Anthony Avalos. I had to cover the opening of that trial. And the Laos kid who was shot in a road rage here in Orange County. Yeah. And that week, he was about to turn 7. And that weekend, my kid is turning 7. Wow. And, that's really hard. But one of the harder parts is for the Avalos story. I went to the openings for the trial, and I'm sitting in the courtroom, and the prosecution does their opening for the first half of the morning, and it's so graphic. It's so graphic. It's hard. I'm trying to compose myself now, but there wasn't a dry eye in there. I mean, deputies, judge, everybody, of what they did to this kid. And so then I'm in there for the first couple hours, and I mean, they're showing pictures. And I won't go into it here because this is coffee and media, yay. But the funny, not funny thing is right as the judge is like, we're going to break for lunch, this is in downtown LA, I get a text from Gary and Shannon's producer, hey, can you come on and let us know about what's going on in the Anthony Avalos case? And so I'm like, yep, I'll go down, run downstairs, and I'm just logged on from my news truck and go on live, and I just dumped. If you're riding in the car right now, you might not want to listen to this story. And you can hear it in my voice during it, and it was just like that stuff you take home, and it's really hard doing that. But I like I said, I balance it with, I mean, who else is going to speak up for these kids?
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. How did the producers at your station respond to when you allowed your humanity to show through?
Well, the producers is not really the issue. They're just working with me through the talk show. So typically something like that'll happen, and I'll like in that regard, I text Shannon, Gary and Shannon. And I was like, man, was that bad? Because you could tell. You know what I'm saying? She's like, no, you're a human. And a professor once told me, when I had asked him about covering something that you know intricately, say it's race or rap or something like that, and he was like, if you were doing a story on Disneyland, you've been to Disneyland, right? That doesn't change if you're a real reporter, it shouldn't change how you cover a story, and so I hope that answers the question, but it just it's you're human,
right.
And I think I got a whole bunch of emails and people are posting on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, hey, I heard that live shot. That was really a lot. I had to pull over. You know what I mean? So that's what it is. I mean, I like when I was doing the George Tyndall story from USC, he's the gynecologist. That was one of the first stories I caught when I got here. And I remember calling my newsroom and saying, I have to say a lot of stuff. It's for the power of the story. You have to let the listener know, and as a result, we have to put disclaimers at the top. And I had to let people know that this is a huge deal. He's been doing this for decades. Oh, he has allegedly been doing this for decades.
Oh, there you
go. Yeah, and he has not been convicted. Funny
Oh.
story. He is still sitting.
Wow.
He has not been convicted or acquitted. It could go either way. Just to be fair.
Wow. So you talk about the reality that you're human, but you're still having to cover these things. I love the posture of wanting to be the advocate and voice for those that have been marginalized. As a Black man here in Orange County, it's a little different than LA. You started in LA, now you're in Orange County. You covered the Black Lives Matter movement, the George Floyd riots. How was that for you?
Well, I didn't start in LA. I still cover South LA over to Long Beach, Riverside, San Bernardino, all the way down.
We just
so
like to
Orange
think we
County,
got you.
So it wasn't really a big change for me because, interestingly enough, I'm from Phoenix, and it's a Republican area, and Phoenix has been turning purple for years. And so you have Phoenix stuck in the middle of this huge Republican area. Similarly, yet conversely, you have Orange County that at one time was super Republican, is turning purple, some would say, and it's stuck within the middle of this Democrat area. So it's similar to me in that, in keeping in mind that I believe that people have stories to tell. So now, the only thing that's different is now the Republicans are kind of the minority in when you're talking about stories in California because of there's so much Democratic power in politics and local government and stuff like that. So a place like Orange County, it becomes a great place for stories to tell. Like, hey, we can't just have all stories about the left. These stories about the right matter too. And so that's what it's been like for me.
Do you feel like the news industry has done a good job in balancing equity and opportunities for multicultural journalists?
Oh, see, this is a controversial question, only because of my answer. No, and yes. It's on one hand, it's kind of like the argument over what was it, the college thing that just happened, affirmative action. It's because, and this is why I love stories like this. My favorite stories are when people are so mad about it, and you could literally ask anybody, two people, and you're always going to get two different answers. Abortion's another good example. And because it allows me to tell both sides of the story. And so something like affirmative action is just, it's meant to do well, but you can hear arguments on both sides about people who are saying that you're just doing that to fix something, and you're doing it from a way that you think fixes something without asking the people who you think it's actually fixing, if that makes sense. And then on the other end, it's like, hey, we got to do something because nothing has been done for all this time. And if we don't do anything, it's going to continue to get worse. And that just becomes this back and forth of where are we trying to get forward in an issue. And my job is to try to tell both sides of that so we can at least move towards some sort of solution, whatever that is.
How do you feel like you've been afforded every opportunity? Regardless of your race or background or anything?
That's a complicated question too, because what does every opportunity mean? One of my great aunts used to say, always remember that if you were in a race, we're always going to be 400 years behind. And no matter how much happens, we'll have started that race 400 years later. So, it feels like, I'm not a one to complain, but at the same time, not everybody's like me. You know what I mean? I think I'm pretty great. And so
you're a rapper, of course you were.
Right. I mean that to say, just because I can get up and do the push-ups or do the work doesn't mean the next man or the next woman can. And so, it's hard to say whether I got the opportunities or I worked for those opportunities. So,
do you have hope for the future here in our region as it relates to people's understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion? Do you have hope? Do you feel like we're heading in the right direction? Do you think we need to ramp up even stronger? Like, what are your thoughts?
So, racially, I assume you're asking this question. What's interesting about me, I'm biracial, and my family's from Chicago, South Chicago, and my dad moved out here to Phoenix, Arizona, to a place, actually we started in a place called Cornville, and I bet nobody here has ever heard of Cornville, which is about 40 minutes from Sedona, Prescott, that area. My dad was the only black person in the entire town. He worked for advertising for the local paper, interestingly. And so as a result, I was a kid going to school, and I'm called all kinds of names. This is Arizona. And when we moved to Phoenix, I got chased home by skinheads. So I felt racism. And then my dad would say, okay, well, let's send you off to Chicago for the summer. Go hang out with your cousins out there. And I am not black enough when I get there. And I'm called all kinds of names. So I was mad at everybody growing up. So you have all that. And I remember fighting. I was in an era where, like, I guess my generation was the generation that helped spread this don't say the N-word thing. Like, there had to be a group that helped spread this along, and we didn't spread it peacefully, I should say. And once that started being accepted, and I'm saying that as a small microcosm of a larger issue, the needle started moving in my head. Okay, things are getting better. And this is a very naive idea, if you think about everything that's happened preceding me being able to be a rapper in marches and that sort of thing. And then you think about everything that's going to happen later. And I think I was surprised when everything got kicked back up with Trayvon Martin and a slew of shootings beyond that we just didn't know about and people were just finding out about. And I say we didn't know about it as in America, but some of us knew about it the whole time. And just like seeing it live on TV for Emmett Till, and then people seeing those pictures for the first time, all fast forward to Trayvon, fast forward to George Floyd. I was surprised that I was so hopeful then, and to be reintroduced to where we are, and then all the way up to 2020 and seeing it. It doesn't seem like anything has changed. I mean, and it's so hard to say that when we've had a black president and all these things have changed, but at the same time, life is about nuance. That's literally what I do for a living, is saying that, there's still a lot to be done, a gargantuan amount to be done.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
So we have just time for another question or two, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. You're our first guest from radio, and so we kind of know what newsrooms are like in print and in broadcast TV. One of the things our team always says is we love working with Corbin because he doesn't have to check with a producer. He doesn't have to run it by. He can make his own story. He can make his own decisions.
It's not like that for everyone. That comes with work.
Well, and trust, right?
Right,
yes.
Trust, yes.
But tell us some of the things that you are looking for as a radio journalist. What are the things that kind of pique your interest, and what are the things that you want to see when you're looking to make that determination? Beyond a really great pitch headline.
A really good pitch, not in all capitals. Breaking. I'm going to decide if this is breaking. I get hundreds of emails every day, and the ones that say breaking, this is going on. Okay, dude, calm down. You know what I mean? Like, or hey, I just wanted to make sure you got this. I get them all. I look at them all. It's literally my job. I have a bucket to fill. I have a hungry monster that's craving content every day. I have to fill that 2, 3, 4 stories per day with multiple versions. So yes, if I saw it and I didn't respond, it's because it's not for me, or I'm doing other things that I can't get to that. But I'm looking for a really good human story, like you mentioned. We were talking earlier about the macaroni one you guys did in Newport Beach. I
wanted to tell everyone what I love about Corbin is and I would just really encourage all of you to not think that your story is not worth radio, because we had Make-A-Wish was one of our clients, and they had 2 Newport Beach elected officials who were going to Cappy's restaurant, which is an iconic diner on PCH, and they had been donating $1 for every kid's mac and cheese ordered over the last several years, and had been giving that to Make-A-Wish. So we came up with let's do a Make-A-Wish or mac and cheese eating contest on National Mac and Cheese Day. Kind of a fun little PR stunty kind of thing, but it had a great angle. It had like elected officials, it had a great small business, and it had a really great give back component with one of their Wish alum, and it's a really important organization doing great things. I would never have dreamed that would have been a Corbin story, but it was. Why?
Well, because the elected officials you had were from Newport Beach, and Orange County gets a lot of controversial stories coming out from the Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, yeah, and various other cities, not to just single them out. And I call about them all, and I'm cool with all these people.
Corbin, I think you're cool with all of Southern California.
Thank you. I would hope so. One thing I like is when I have people, like I do a controversial story. This is a quick aside, but I have a controversial story. I'll look on my social media, and you'll see people yelling on both sides of the story. Or, thanks, Corbin, for doing this story. Yeah, you tell them if it's something they want to hear. But if it's not, that same person, these people are crazy. But they're not yelling at me. And if they're not yelling at me, that means I'm telling the story fairly. And I like it when no one has any idea what side of the fence I'm on, because that means I've told the story properly. And I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, you were talking about elected officials.
Right. So anyway, and so I've done a lot of stories with Newport Beach, and a lot of the times, or some of the time, these are controversial stories. And I looked at this as an opportunity to put a human side to the mayor, I think the mayor and vice mayor who were there, and so they don't always have to answer these questions for stuff that they're doing for their constituents. That's lost in the mix here.
Right.
It's controversial, sure, but these people were voted in, and they are doing this because this is what they promised they were going to do. And just because another side doesn't like this doesn't mean it's not an important story or something important that they're doing. So I look at it like, hey, here's a chance to do this, and then as soon as I hear it, obviously it's a macaroni thing, so that's not going to work on radio. But I'm thinking you got to make a witch kid moderating. They're going to say something funny. As you're trying to shovel down tons of macaroni, that's got to be, that sort of thing. That's going to be funny. And then, how many jokes can you make about macaroni and mayor for leads and stuff like that? That's why I thought, hey, this will be fun. Yeah. I ended up getting pulled off that story. I was on the Rolling Hills Estates thing, and there was an update there, so I had to jump on that.
Yeah, I just love that you thought through all of that and saw that opportunity. So I think the moral of the story of that is always think beyond what you like. Don't leave Corbin out of your pitches because you might not think it has the right flavor. He's an expert at trying to figure out how to bring the sound in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So let's open it up. So we have a microphone runner. There's Chelsea. It's important to use the microphone because we want to make sure we capture your question on camera. If you could kindly just say your name and where you're from, and then ask your question, that'd be great.
I've said it all.
Hi, my name is Meg. I'm with Treat Public Relations.
Hi.
And thank you so much for all of your wonderful stories. I think something that sticks out to me is that you dared to dream a new dream, right? You had this dream of your music career and then a new dream of journalism. I think we tell a lot of young people as they're going to college and they feel like it's required and they got to pick a major, they're picking something at this really pivotal moment for the rest of their life. What are your thoughts on everybody's least favorite word since the pandemic, pivoting? And what was it like for you to really take the next step once you had that inkling that journalism might be of interest to you? And what advice would you offer to somebody who thinks, oh, I'm stuck in this career that I picked or stuck in this dream that I picked, even though I want to do something else? What would you tell them?
Nothing that hasn't been said ad nauseum in every euphemism or just do it from Nike or early bird gets the worm, etc. I love those kinds of sayings because even though you're not supposed to use them in writing, people are like, don't use that. But they're like, one thing I used to think is called universal truths often find expression in universal cliches. And I say all that to say that makes a statement like just do it or you can be whatever you want to be like a magical incantation if you really, really want to do it. But therein lies the rub. I mean, the really want to do it is the hard part. Pivoting and saying, hey, I want to be a rapper and now I want to be a journalist is not as easy as it sounds. And I don't think it sounds easy. It was a huge amount of work. And I'm a type A kind of person, so not just moving from one to the other. I graduated top of my class. I got honors. I had, I was summa cum laude. I wanted to make sure that when I went to go ask for a journalism job, they weren't going to be like, you were a rapper. I was like, I was a rapper, but here's this receipt saying I came from Cronkite and I graduated with good grades and, I can do this.
And I happen to hang out with Wu-Tang.
I was hiding that part because that wasn't helping any job applications.
I think it gives you major credit.
Thanks. But yeah, there you go. Just the hard work. I mean, it sounds so cliche, but you have to do the push-ups. At some point, you have to sit down there. I tell my kids this all the time. you got to do the push-ups. But the cool part of that is when you do the push-ups, you can demand the rewards. It's that simple.
That's great. I think Deborah had a question. Let's get the microphone. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Deborah. I run a nonprofit called Arts and Learning Conservatory, and we work with a lot of social justice and making the arts accessible for kids.
Cool.
I loved your story, just in general, and hearing that you were trained on piano and classically trained and things of that sort. Yeah. The question I have for you, though, is when you were doing journalism pieces, how did you deal with people who refused to talk to you and didn't want to give you information? Like, how did you shake that information out of people?
I'm persistent.
Okay.
And a very old journalism trick is if you're talking about like a controversial story and a person doesn't want to talk about this, oh, please. I will say, okay, if you're not going to talk, I'm going to put decline to comment. And when I put decline to comment, I don't know if any of you guys have heard my stories, I use inflection. Inflection is one of the biggest things I brought from rap over to my story. So when I tell a story, you could say, I'm just using this as an example. The thieves stole a couch and 10 TVs, and police haven't been able to find where they went. Or the thieves stole a couch and 10 TVs, and all these people are out of their home, and police have not been able to locate the suspect. Police have declined to comment. In LA, you see what I'm saying? It's the same statement, but it's said with
brilliant.
So much power. And from print to radio to TV, if you're a real politician, that's the worst answer you can have go out there over this. You know, now it means 90% of my story, 95% of my story is going to be assigned to one side. You know, and your only response is decline to comment. And that right there is enough, typically enough power for somebody to say, all right, well, let me just try to phrase some sort of response to what's going on.
I think it's fascinating how you use your rap career right there. I just want to point out, because we do have a lot of clients in the room, that's why we always tell you, even if you're not ready to say something, do not say no comment. Say something so that happens. You can respond. And there's a lot of
sometimes no comment works. I mean, if there's just nothing you can do about it, yep, we did it. I mean, expounding on that only adds more time to it. I get it. Sometimes that's the proper response, but not answering or saying anything, that is one of my biggest pet peeves for PR, for PIOs. Yeah. Like, dude, that's your job. You answer the phone. Especially, I've gotten, this is funny, public relations people, I've gotten emails from someone, hey, this is going on, here's the public relations, blah, 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 blah. Literally just comes up in my inbox, and I'm like, cool, I was just looking for something. Boom. Hey, can you have someone jump on with me, blah, blah. No answer. Wait, you just put this out. Like, how are you not ready to respond to calls? Or I don't know if we can get someone to speak on this today. Then don't put out the release. How about that? You know. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, I love it. Christine has a question.
Hi, I'm Christine with Working Wardrobes, a nonprofit in Orange County. Hi. So the work that we do, it's a lot of work in the social justice space that people don't always realize it's in the social justice space. And I'm thinking about how you shared, you don't care and you don't want to lean one way or another. Thinking about the community that we're in, do you think, or what's your advice when we're telling stories about the work that we do in our clients? Is it better to lean into the social justice work that we're doing, or do we kind of keep it down the straight and narrow and let people make their own decisions without the risk of isolating some of our donors and people that would support us?
I think it depends on the audience. For me, since I work for KFI, I don't know if you guys listen to KFI, but there are, we have, let's see, how can I say this kindly in case anyone's watching? We have, obviously we fit a niche for Southern California. I mentioned it before. This is a Republican-led area, and it's stuck in a Democrat, state. And so as a result, it's hard to get these things out. So if I come and I pitch Working Wardrobes is helping, people in less fortunate communities. And then I start putting in buzzwords, under abused best practices or any of that stuff. My editors are going to be like, we don't care about that. What's going on with the homeless? What's going on with this, right? So you phrase it in a different kind of way, or you build the story, at least for my station, to where it's something that impacts everyone and it touches everyone. And then it becomes, oh man, these people need to get a job. Where are they going to find, a place to get clothes? How are they going to, we have this whole building that does all A to Z right here, and you have these veterans that need help. You have these blah, blah, blah that needs help. And then tucked in within there are these disadvantaged groups that are still getting the exposure, if that makes sense.
By the way, I love that you actually know that about Working Wardrobes. Awesome.
Yeah, I remember you guys.
That was very cool. I don't know if we have another question, but I just want to, you made a really interesting point earlier when we were talking, and I want to make sure that you get this tip out to everybody. Talk about Monday mornings and the opportunity that gives a lot of PR people.
Oh yeah, this was a tip I actually had intended to save.
Oh, sorry.
Until I ever if I ever make the trip over to what us reporters call the dark side, also known as public relations. And because, as a reporter, and this is why we come to the dark side, because as a reporter, we know exactly what reporters are looking for, and we're just people, man. We have soccer practice today. I just had a wild weekend, and, I've been partying all night with children, and I getting up on Monday morning or Sunday night, and I'm looking for what I'm going to do tomorrow, and I'm scouring. Oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? Anything. And so what I always tell PR people, blah, 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 is, dude, throw something at 10 o'clock on Monday morning. Who's not coming? Who doesn't have nothing else? You have nothing else to do. I mean, of course, Mondays, there are some times when lots of things are going on. But if you throw something or you schedule something for a Monday, I think there's just a greater chance. Because by Wednesday or Thursday, I've already figured out my week. I've got more stories than I can handle. There it is.
I thought that was great. So
Monday's the day.
Time for one more question.
So I'm fascinated.
Who are you first?
Oh, I'm Sandy Morgan,
Hi, Sandy.
Vanguard's Global Center for Women and
Okay.
Justice.
Hi.
And so I'm fascinated with your comments about biracial. Historically, Elizabeth Stanton, Susan Anthony, and Frederick Douglass, women and Black men have been allies for decades. And the biracial thing has become a part of my landscape in how I negotiate racial equity. Being a voice, I'm a white woman. Do I have a voice? And so I actually encountered the bias that you talked about between Phoenix and Chicago as I started my relationships with multiracial community. And I teach at a university where I sit with a student and they are Black, Latino, Asian, white, multiracial. But I've had people say you can't work with that person on a Black issue because they're biracial and they won't understand. So where do we as gendered allies begin to engage that issue in the, for want of a better phrase, diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Wow, that's a complicated question. Well, I can tell you as a biracial person that, and this is a broad statement, so obviously everybody's different, but we identify as Black. I mean, it's you had one, like, even though I was saying both sides weren't accepting me, they were making fun of me. One side was trying to beat me up and chasing me home. The other side was just making jokes. And that makes a big difference. Being called not Black enough and stuff like that, but still being able to, be part of something, it made a difference in my life. And so I would be, I don't know, I guess offended if someone were to tell me you can't talk on a Black issue, especially given my personal struggle for the Black culture and everything that I've done to be where I'm at. I do think it's one of the best examples you can use about accepting biracial people as Black is, you look at some of these great players, Tiger Woods, greatest Black golfer, first Black president. These are biracial people, and obviously that's where they lie. And honestly, I would believe that if you were to ask a biracial person about the Black experience, they wouldn't have a problem explaining it because we are going through a lot of the same things, if not the same things. I don't know if this is answering your question, but is it answering your question? I don't know. They took the mic from you.
Yes, but can you also bring in the role of allyship across genders in that from the historical frame? Because it is still an element of how we're moving forward.
Between gender?
Yeah, women and Black men as allies. Like, for instance, Ken Morris, the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass. He and I worked together on some of the issues around human trafficking and that historical 400-year head start. Women had some other issues that also put them behind in equity in the workplace and life goals.
I don't know. I think, how many, overused term here, marginalized groups are fighting the same struggle? I mean, you could look at the LGBTQ community, you could look at women's suffrage, you could look at civil rights, and so many similarities. Yeah, I think it's funny how Dave Chappelle put it. We're all like heading in the same direction, but sometimes we're fighting from different angles. And to me, it's the same. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding the allyship part of it, but to me, it seems like it doesn't need to be said. If something is going on that Black people are not getting and women are not also getting, then I would think that's a common cause that both can fight for together. And the ally should be there just because we have a common enemy, not an enemy, but the enemy being the whatever they're not being allowed to do. Yeah.
All right. Well, Corbin's going to hang out for a little bit longer, and I'd love all of you to get the chance to meet him. Thank you so much for joining us for this morning coffee with, and thank you so much, Corbin. It's been fascinating getting to know you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.